It is the Cares for Kids Radiothon, 194, the number one hit music station, and we are looking for your donations in the last 15 minutes here of our Power Hour at 701-478-KIDS, 5437, or you can text KIDS to 35270 and have your donation matched by Frederick Transport of Enderlin. Now, I think that there is something that you've probably heard quite a bit about in the news, and it was something that kind of scared you, especially if you're a parent, but you didn't really hear more about it past that because you didn't know anybody that personally dealt with it. Well, I think we're about to all get kind of illuminated. Terry, do you hear us okay?
I'm here, yeah.
So, Terry Fillion, you are from Minot. Would you mind sharing with us from start to finish what brought you and your little guy, who is 14, Caden, into Sanford Children's Hospital?
I don't mind at all. So, Caden was diagnosed with COVID. It was on election day, so early November. You know, which means the whole family went into like lockdown and quarantine, and life got a little hectic. He didn't have a whole lot of symptoms. You know, he did lose his sense of smell. It was kind of entertaining because we would go get every weird thing we could and say, "Smell this," and he was like, "Nope, can't smell that." But he didn't really, you know, have the fever, or he didn't really get that sick with it. So he was released to go back to quote-unquote normal life on the 14th of November. And he maybe made 3 full days of school, and he was just kind of complaining and just not himself. And so the 4th day would have been his 4th day back to school. He said, "I just don't feel good." And I have so much guilt because as a parent, you know, it's like, is there a test that you didn't study for? Did you forget to complete an assignment? Why are you trying to not go to school today? Because you don't look sick. And he couldn't really pinpoint what didn't feel good. So you give him the benefit of the doubt. You know, his dad and I talk about, he's 14, he's in that weird, you know, space where you're straddling as a parent. Is he a child? Is he a young adult? And you try to give them the freedom to tell you what's going on with their own bodies, because we really don't know. So we did. We let him stay home. And I noticed that he was bringing me a full dinner plate after dinner. His plate didn't look like he'd touched anything. And he just would say, "I don't have an appetite." And he's a 14-year-old boy. He plays football. He wrestles. The kid eats, you know. So that was really the first thing that was suspicious to us. We get to Thanksgiving, and even Thanksgiving, he just didn't want to go. And we just had a small gathering, you know, just close family, and we forced him to go. And we got back from Thanksgiving dinner, and he said, "I just don't feel good." And we asked, "Do you need to go to the doctor?" "No, I don't need to go to the doctor." He said, "I just need some rest. I'll get better." So that was Thursday. Saturday night, he woke me up in the middle of the night, and he brought the thermometer with him. His temp was at like 103, and my child said to me, "I think I'm dying. Can you please take me to someone who can help me?" And so, you know, then you're scrambling, and we did take him in. The thing that was most alarming at that point was, number one, his temperature, but number two, he had this really weird rash, and it was on one hand, one foot, and the back of one leg. And I mean to tell you, you could watch the redness spread. That's how quickly it was taking over his body. So clearly he needed to be seen immediately. We got him to Trinity. We received outstanding care. He was in a private bed within half an hour, and they called Dr. Udekwe in. We had absolutely just an outstanding experience with Dr. Udekwe. But our family and friends were really advocating, you know, saying you need to get him to Sanford. There's nothing wrong with Trinity, but Sanford is set up to care specifically for children, and they have access to better tools. So we approached our physician, and what he said was, "It doesn't serve me to keep this child here if I can't heal him. If I reach a point where I can't take care of him, I promise you, I will send him to Sanford." That was Monday, late Monday. His dad and I did 24-hour shifts, so at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, one would go home and try to spend some time with his siblings and care for the dogs and maybe even sleep for a hot minute. So 24-hour shifts, and you would think that sounds like an eternity, but time just disappeared. And, you lived for that crack of light when the doctor or nurse would come in to do vitals or to run another test, because that light was just really the only hope that you could hang on to, because they kept saying, we don't know. That was negative. This test was negative. We don't know. We don't have answers. And as a parent, you want answers and you want a plan. So we learned that the CDC basically has this list. I believe it's 40-some other different scenarios that needed to be ruled out before they could kind of entertain the diagnosis of MIS-C. We'd never heard of it.
Now, for anybody that doesn't know what that means, what is MIS-C?
Multi-system inflammatory syndrome, and the C stands for children. And it's a condition that can develop in a child who has been infected with COVID. So what was happening in Caden's body, typically as you're recovering from something, your body starts to produce antibodies that will help to protect you from future infection. His antibodies were literally killing him. His heart was shutting down, is what was happening. When you get your blood pressure taken, and it's 120/80, they're like, that's great, that's normal. Caden's was like 63/37, and his pulse was at 128 beats per minute. So what was going on is his body was trying to shut his heart down, and his little heart was fighting for his life, for every breath. And Wednesday morning, Dr. Udekwe said, it's time for Caden to go to Stanford. And that is terrifying, and at the same time, again, you're like, okay, this is hope. We have a plan. They're sending us somewhere where he can be helped. They told us the transfer would take 3 to 5 hours before they could even get him on the road because of all the paperwork and insurance and finding a bed at Stanford. And my child was in the back of that ambulance within 45 minutes. They did not waste any time. Arriving in Fargo we were just blown away. He had an entire team of doctors. And we're talking cardiology, immunology, infectious disease, and every single one of these doctors specializes in caring for children. And we got to Stanford on Wednesday, and it really felt like touch and go. People were in and out and explaining to us every single thing they were doing. We didn't have to really advocate for our child because we felt like we were a part of the decisions and what was happening and going on, and to be able to just relax and focus on caring for your child in the way a mom and dad needs to in that situation, instead of having to worry about, did they run this test? Why did they do that test? What are these results? What does that mean? They explained everything to us, and they told us maybe he could go home, over the weekend, but they didn't really necessarily like what they were seeing when he first got there. And at one of our follow-up appointments, this is one of my favorite things to share, one of his doctors said to Caden, he said, "Kid, you shook me." He said, "I went home the night that I met you. I went home to my little children, and I couldn't sleep a wink because all I could think about was how I was going to save your life." And to know that man took that home with him that night, it just meant the world to us. We had a situation where one of his blankets needed to be washed, and one of the staff at Stanford was like, "I'll wash that for you." Just those little things above and beyond every step of the way. It was absolutely phenomenal. And 100%, I can say without a doubt, my child is alive today because of Stanford Children's Hospital. He got to come home the following Monday, and he was so thin that he couldn't even look at his own reflection. His eyes were sunken, and he had to be on some pretty aggressive steroids. So he was the crabbiest of crabby teenagers. He was like a mini grumpy old man, Walter Matthau. He He spent a month coming down off those steroids, baby aspirin, vitamin D. I mean, having him home was one step, but you don't realize as a parent what's involved in taking care of a patient in a hospital. Because when we got him home, we had to continue doing some of the things that the hospital did for us while we were there. And let me tell you, people in the medical field are angels because it's exhausting, and they always came in with a smile. They were so respectful of his privacy and dignity. And those are two things that typically you can't count on when you're in the hospital, because you can't even get up and go to the bathroom by yourself. He needed help doing every little thing. And basically he had to build his strength back up. I mean, he couldn't walk up and down the hallway when we were at Stanford. So they gave him small, attainable goals. Something else that I really like to share is this. About 2 weeks ago, Caden said that he had been talking to one of his buddies, and his buddy said, "Yeah, I heard you almost died." And Caden was like, "Mom, did I almost die?" And he didn't even know. That's how phenomenal the level of care was at Stanford, because there was no, it never felt like this was an urgent situation or that he wasn't going to get better. And that is what he told me. He said, "I had no idea, because I just knew I was going to get better." And that's the environment that they provide at the Children's Hospital at Stanford. Having that parent's kitchen, it's the middle of the night and you haven't eaten and you don't want to leave your child. They have a kitchen with protein bars and drinks and water, and they've thought of everything. And I will forever be so thankful to the doctors and nurses and the entire staff who cared for my child, because he's here today because we took him to those people to be healed.
And Terry, we got to ask you, because you paint a picture that tells us that Caden is one strong 14-year-old, never obviously realized the gravity of what he was dealing with, but I can hear it in your voice. You definitely did. How did you get through this?
There's still so much trauma surrounding it, and we're working through it together. But the support of the social media community, I was that mom that was like, "Oh my gosh, if my child was ever sick, I don't know that I could share that on Facebook."
Mm-hmm.
But I did. We shared Caden's story, and we updated daily. And the comments, the thoughts, the prayers, the love. Some friends started a GoFundMe page for us. And, something else that I want to say, there might be somebody listening right now that thinks, "Well, I only have $5 to give, and that's not going to make a difference." I can't tell you how many people gave us $5, and it adds up, and it made a huge impact on our ability to just focus on Caden getting better and not stress about how on earth we were going to pay for everything. So if you got $5, believe me, it makes a difference. We leaned on each other. A lot of people didn't even realize that his dad and I are not married, but we are committed to raising our children together, and we did lean on one another. You want to talk about awkward? I had to go to my ex-husband's house and pack his bag so he could go to Fargo. But you focus, and that's what we were able to do, is focus on us, and leave the rest up to the experts, because we knew the minute that we got there that we were in good hands, and we could just pray and do our best to stay optimistic and positive for Caden.
Well, we got to ask you, Terry, for people that are listening and they've yet to join into this and donate to the Children's Hospital, what would you say that might inspire them to make that phone call?
Even if you're not a parent, you have a parent, right? And watching your child fight for their life is terrifying, and it's something that I hope and pray that whoever's out there listening, that you don't ever have to go through it. But somebody is going through it right now, and they could really use your help so that they get to take their child home the way that we got to bring our Caden home.
Well, Terry, we thank you so much for sharing your and Caden's story and the fact that you're both through this, and he's doing well. We're so happy to hear that, and so grateful for you. And thank you so much for sharing this.
Thank you for the opportunity. God bless you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Cares for Kids Radiothon.